Welcome everyone to another video discussion of free answer writing program by Vajiram and Ravi. As you have seen the last video, we have made an announcement with respect to the answer writing program 2023-24. The program is about to end by the end of the March, so we will be continuing back after prelims. We are very grateful for the support and the comments that you have showed for the entire program. You can check out those comments and understand that we are very grateful for the entirety of support that you have given us. We'll be continuing this program post prelims so that you can focus on your answer writing skills. We'll be also learning different structures through which we can augment our answer writing skills and thereby excel the mains of civil services of UPSC examination. So let's go and start with today's session. Today we are going to see questions from Human Geography of GS1. Let us see the overview of those questions. The very first question is with respect to groundwater. Over here we are going to see that how groundwater is very crucial, but there are certain challenges. We are going to see reasons for those challenges and we will also suggest measures to ensure the sustainability. The second question is with respect to marine resources and how utilization of the same can drastically reduce human miseries. So we will understand how we can use those resources and also understand the challenges with respect to the same. And last question is with respect to the India's food security, where we have seen that India, from being a net food importer, have emerged as a net food exporter. We are going to see what are the kind of reasons behind the same in the answer. So let us start with very first question. Let us read the very first question together. Groundwater is a silent resource which impacts human at multiple fronts. In this regard, discuss the reasons for its alarming decline. Also suggest measures to ensure its sustainability. So if you see this question, you will be able to understand the structure. In the introduction, as very first line over here is talking about that how groundwater is a silent resource which impacts human at multiple front. You can give some idea with respect to the same. In the body part, you can firstly talk about the reasons for its alarming decline, and in the second part you can talk about the measures to ensure its sustainability. And lastly, in conclusion, we can again reiterate the significance of groundwater for us for the sustainable development. So this is how you will structure for question number 1. Let us see the introduction in detail. Firstly, we can explain this quote as in groundwater is a silent resource which impacts humans at multiple front. You can talk about how it supports agriculture, where 90% of the irrigation is dependent on groundwater. You can talk about ecosystem services that is provided by groundwater. You can talk about how drinking water, as in more than 50% of global population is dependent on groundwater for drinking water. And you can also talk about how industries are also dependent on groundwater. You can also understand this part through this fact that groundwater is merely 1% of the total water resource of the world, and despite that it has this much of significance. This is something which you can talk about as how it impacts human at multiple fronts. You can also give certain recent current affair based incidents, as in you can talk about that how water crisis as groundwater level declines has been faced by multiple cities all around the globe. So that is something you can inculcate for your introduction. Let us move on to the body. In the heading 1, as the demand is to discuss the reasons for its alarming decline, we will list down different reasons and explain with substantiation. Firstly, you can talk about that how overexploitation of groundwater, either by agriculture or by industry, has led to decline of groundwater. Over here we have seen that how there are certain government initiatives or incentives like subsidies that have again led to overexploitation of groundwater. So that is something over here. Next is poor governance. Over here we have to understand that how, with respect to the regulation and monitoring, we have failed to arrest the groundwater decline. Third is with respect to urbanization. Urbanization has again multiple challenges, and one of the same is lack of access of water, and due to which the people rely for groundwater for their daily water needs. So thus urbanization and also increase in population in such areas have led to decline of groundwater. Next is with respect to pollution. We have seen that how industrial effluents, they pollute the groundwater. We have seen various instances of arsenic poisoning in groundwater at various regions of the nation. So this is again a crucial reason for alarming decline of groundwater. And lastly is neglect by public, civil societies and media. Over here we are talking about lack of awareness and education with respect to the importance and utilization of groundwater. So these are the reasons for alarming decline of groundwater. Let us move on to the heading 2, where we have to talk about measures to ensure its sustainability. Firstly, you can talk about aquifer mapping and real-time monitoring. Over here, through this kind of initiatives, we can understand how exactly we can use the groundwater in what proportion. So this is something through aquifer mapping and real-time monitoring. Second is with respect to education and awareness. Over here, we are making sure that people understand the importance of groundwater and thus do not rely in some illegal or immoral activities with respect to extraction of groundwater. Next is Groundwater Regulation Act to ensure that the industries as well as households, they utilize the groundwater in efficient manner. At the same time, there are certain monitoring mechanisms also. Next is with respect to afforestation and rainwater harvesting. Now through afforestation, we can understand that how trees and the entire ecosystem can also play significant role in augmenting the groundwater resources. With respect to rainwater harvesting, we are directly making sure that water as a resource has been utilized in an efficient manner. Next is with respect to international and interstate cooperation. We have seen that how regions at the fringe, as in with respect to the boundary where the water resources are shared, can have certain kind of issues. We have seen multiple river related issues in our nation itself, and those issues can be settled so that people do not have to rely on groundwater. Thus, river as a freshwater resource can also be utilized. Next is effective governance structure. Now, with respect to the reasons, we have seen that how poor governance with respect to the regulation and monitoring aspect has led to decline of groundwater. With respect to effective governance structure, we can talk about Mihir Shah Committee, which talks about integration of Central Water Commission and Groundwater Board, also linking cropping pattern with groundwater availability. So that way we are making sure that the regulation is effective. At the same time, the problem of over exploitation is also avoided. And lastly is with respect to the government initiatives, we have to ensure that we implement all the initiatives in true spirit. We have initiatives like Aquifer Management Project, Catch the Rain campaign and Atal Bhujal Yojana. Through this kind of initiatives, we can ensure that the groundwater is sustained. So that is all for the body aspect. Let us move on to the conclusion. In conclusion, you can talk about again with respect to the challenges and continue as in transition that how for the sustainable development groundwater as a crucial resource is very significant. You can link SDGs such as SDG 1 poverty, hunger, SDG 3 health, 6 clean water and sanitation, 11 sustainable cities and community, and lastly responsible consumption and production. So these are the kind of SDGs you can inculcate in the conclusion and provide for linkages where you can talk about that how groundwater as a resource is very significant for human at multiple front and is also directly impacting the realization of such SDGs. So this is how you will conclude your question number 1. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. Firstly, in the introduction, you can talk about some data points as in the percentage of groundwater in total water content of the earth and how exactly despite that minimal amount we are relying a lot on groundwater, and you can link different sectors either through 1 or 2, 3 lines detailing the entirety of it or through a mind map as you have seen in the introduction. Then you can give out the body heading 1 reasons with proper keywords and substantiation. Next you can talk about the heading 2 which is respect to the measures, and lastly in conclusion you can link SDGs to ensure the sustainable use of groundwater. So that is all for question number 1. Let's move on to question number 2. Let's read the question number 2 together. The effective utilization of marine resources can drastically reduce human miseries. Do you agree? What are the challenges in effective utilization of marine resources? So if you see this question, we can easily understand that the structure of answer is quite simple and straightforward. In the introduction, as we have to talk about marine resources, you can talk about what are the components of marine resources, and you can give a transitionary line where if we have to connect the first part where is effective utilization can drastically reduce human miseries, that how marine resources can act as a alternative resources from our traditional perspective. That is something you can talk about. Now as the question is directly asking you, do you agree over here? So in the body aspect, in the heading 1, you can directly address the same. You can talk about the benefits of marine resources for solving the human miseries. And in the heading 2, as we have to talk about the challenges, you can directly inculcate the points of challenges in the heading 2 of the body. And lastly, in the conclusion, you can talk about way ahead, or you can talk about certain government initiatives to realize the potential of marine resources. So that is the structure of question number 2. Let us start with the introduction. In the introduction, you can explain marine resources, which are physical or biological resources which we extract from the oceans and seas. Over here, we have to understand that 70% of Earth's surface is covered with ocean, which is through which we can realize marine resources. So we have a huge potential over here. You can talk about what are the different kind of ecosystems involved and what are the kind of services that we can extract from marine resources. Now let us see how exactly marine resource benefits us in the body heading 1, as in effective utilization of marine resources. Firstly, it can help with respect to food security. Over here, we can talk about how fish plus seafood can help with respect to realization of food security. We have already seen that how climate change is impacting the agriculture and productivity of the same. So over here, marine resources through food security can give support for the same. Next is with respect to economic development. As we are exploring towards marine resources, we can talk about that how it can help with respect to employment, livelihood, and thereby augment the human resources potential. Next is with respect to health and medicine. Over here, we can understand that how there are crucial bio drugs and bio components which can be extracted from marine resources and can be utilized for the purpose of health and medicines. The next is with respect to renewable energy. Over here, we can untap the potential of ocean energy through waves, tidal energy, as well as wind energy, which are crucial sources for the renewable energy. So that is something we can extract from marine resources. And lastly, we can talk about climate change resilience. Over here, we are talking about that how climate change is disrupting the earth at various fronts like sea level rise and all. Through marine resources, we can definitely create certain kind of hedge for all this kind of activities, and thus we have certain degree of climate change resilience. So this is the heading 1 of body of question number 2. Let us see the heading 2, where we have to see the challenges for effective utilization of marine resources. Firstly, you can talk about over exploitation. As we have seen with respect to the fishery, where over exploitation can definitely impact the degree of potential that we can use for the marine resources. Next is with respect to lack of information. As we have not explored and understood the potential as well as the idea about marine resources, lack of information can directly impact our ability to ensure that marine resources are effectively utilized. Next is with respect to threat to ecosystem. Again, over here, we have to understand that entirety of the marine ecosystem is very much dependent on multiple levels. So whenever, if there is any over exploitation of specific kind of resource, it can directly impact the other marine resources as well. The next is technological development. We have to understand with respect to exploration of the marine resources, we do not have sufficient technology, and thus a technological limitation definitely impedes our ability to realize the potential. And lastly is tension between nation. Over here, we have to see that how there are various conflicts arising with respect to the realization of marine resources. You can talk about South China Sea over here. So that is something you can inculcate as a challenges for heading 2 of the body. In the conclusion, you can talk about the sustainable development aspect again. Like we talked about the same in the question number 1. Over here, you can talk about it how marine resources are very crucial with respect to elimination of poverty, hunger, for health and well-being, for clean energy and life below water. So these are the kind of SDGs you can inculcate in the transition for your conclusion. You can also talk about government initiatives like how Blue Economy 2.0, which is mentioned in the interim budget of 2024, is something which is going to be helping us with respect to the utilization of marine resources. So that is all for question number 2's conclusion and answer. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. Firstly, in the introduction, you can define the marine resources, you can give certain data points to understand the potential of marine resources. Then you can talk about the effective utilization, where you can give proof points along with the substantiation. Next is with respect to the challenges, you can list down the challenges and provide certain substantiation to give support for the dimensions. And lastly, you can inculcate SDGs. At the same time, you can also talk about government initiatives as we discussed in the conclusion. So this is all for question number 2's answer. Let us move on to question number 3. Let's read the question number 3 together. From being net food importer in 1960s, India has emerged as net food exporter to the world. Provide reasons for the same. Now this is a very straightforward question. Over here we have to see that how India in 1960s, which was very much dependent on food imports, have transitioned itself to net food exporter in the present times. So the structure of the answer is very simple. It's a one body heading question. So in the introduction, you can provide certain data points to justify that how there is this kind of shift. You can provide data points with respect to any specific crop, that how in 1960s the production was some X aspect, and in present context what is the change in production unit. So that is something for introduction. In the body, you have to list down different proof points how exactly India transitioned from the net importer to net food exporter. And in the conclusion, you can provide certain kind of maybe challenges with respect to the food security and provide solutions in the entirety in 3 to 4 lines. So that is something for the structure. Let us start with the introduction. In the introduction, you can provide data points. As I mentioned, that India in 1960s was heavily dependent on the food imports because such as crops such as wheat were produced in such quantity like 10 million tons, 35 million tons for wheat and rice respectively. Whereas their production has significantly augmented to 106 and 130 tons respectively in 2021-2022. So that is something as a data point you can start in the introduction. Let's move on to the body. Now this is a single heading body. So we will provide around 5 to 6 dimensions in depth. Firstly, you can talk about green revolution. So we have seen that how green revolution, and through green revolution we witnessed high yield variety, fertilizers, pesticides and irrigation methods. All of this helped us with respect to the productivity as well as the total production unit. So that is something which we have captured through green revolution. Next, you can talk about increased irrigation cover, as we witnessed that how the green revolution also impacted the total area under irrigation, where in 1960s it was around 18%, which is almost around 15% in present context. So again, the irrigation cover helped with respect to the food security of the nation. Next is with respect to better farming techniques. Over here we have to provide points for the mechanization of agriculture, where different kind of technological advancement helped with respect to automating various ways of producing the agriculture goods. Next is with respect to crop diversification. Previously we were very much dependent only on the food items. Now we have focused also on cash crops which have high value, not just for the economy but also for the food security. The next point that you can inculcate for the reasons is government policy supports. Over here we have witnessed variety of subsidies, either for seeds, for electricity, for water, along with variety of support for the final goods like minimum support price. So these are the kind of government policies which helped and augmented the farmers' support for agriculture. And lastly, we can talk about that how food processing and export also was the part of the entire growth story, where we have seen variety of government schemes along with mega food parks, through which we have understood that food processing also helped with respect to pushing for better food production. So these are the kind of proof points you can inculcate for the heading of this body. Moving on to the conclusion, over here you can give a little bit expanded conclusion, where you can talk about that despite we have achieved the food security, as in we have become food exporter, there are certain challenges such as still small holding agriculture is practiced where per capita land holding of the farmer is quite low. That definitely impacts the productivity of the agriculture. Then we have dependence on rain fed agriculture, as we have seen that only 50% around is dependent, is getting the support of irrigation, whereas the rest of the rest of the agriculture is rain fed dependent. The next is with respect to infrastructure gap. We are talking about forward and backward linkages over here. And lastly, we have income disparity over here. We have to understand the income realized by the farmer through their agriculture practices is again in the list of challenges. And for the same, we can talk about that going ahead, there are possible reforms with respect to the irrigation and market, promotion of high value crops, and lastly, for farmer welfare initiatives, there must be certain kind of hedges. So this is how you can conclude for the question number 3's answer. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. Firstly, in the introduction, you can provide certain proof points to support the statement which is provided in the question. Then you can provide reasons along with substantiation. And lastly, in the conclusion, you can provide both challenges and solutions in 3 to 4 lines. So that is all for question number 3. Thank you and keep writing.